let's get right into it. We're going to tackle a question that's been bugging people for, well, millennia. Why did so many ancient cultures, people who were separated by vast oceans and thousands of years, all look up and decide their gods came from the sky?
I mean, think about it. It's this bizarrely consistent story that pops up everywhere. From the deserts of the Middle East to the jungles of South America, our ancestors looked to the heavens and saw someone or something. So the big question is, were they just seeing shapes in the clouds, or did they have a reason to think something was looking back?
You know the stories. In Greece, you had Zeus, the top god, ruling everything from up on high, literally throwing lightning bolts down from the sky. Then you hop over to Egypt, and there's Ra, the sun god, sailing his boat across the sky every single day. He wasn't just in the sky, he was the sky's main event. And in ancient Sumeria, they got even more specific. They talked about the anunnaki, beings whose very name has been translated to mean those who came from the heavens to Earth. They weren't just up there, they came down here. All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll look at the universal pattern of these gods, check out the scientific explanations, dig into a really weird modern clue, and then, we'll get into the most controversial theory of all.
Okay, first things first, we really have to get our heads around just how widespread this idea is. This isn't one culture hearing a story from another. No, this idea popped up independently all over the world.
In fact, this is pretty cool. Linguists have actually managed to trace a lot of these major sky gods back to a single ancient idea. They've pieced together this name, Deus Pther, which basically means sky father. This was a god worshipped thousands of years before anyone was writing things down, and that name is the root for gods you definitely know, like Zeus and Jupiter.
So here's the kicker. It doesn't matter if it's Indra the storm god in India, or quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent descending from the sky in Mesoamerica. The message is always the same. The real power, the ultimate authority, it's up there. This isn't just a coincidence. It's a core part of the human story, and it needs a good explanation.
So let's start with the most grounded academic explanations. Why did we start looking up in the first place?
I mean, psychologically, you can totally see it, right? If you're an early human, the sky gives you everything you need to live, sun, rain, but it can also take everything away in a flash with a lightning storm. It's this huge, mysterious, untouchable thing. It's everything you're not. So of course, that's where you'd imagine the ultimate power to be.
And then there's the practical side of things. Ancient people were brilliant astronomers because they had to be. Your life depended on knowing when to plant, and that meant tracking the sun and stars. Now imagine being the person who could predict an eclipse. You wouldn't just be smart, you'd seem magical. It's not a huge leap for that reverence for the stars to turn into full-blown worship. Okay, now things get really weird because we're moving from ancient theories to something that happened in modern times. This is a real-world example of how regular beings arriving from the sky can become gods, almost overnight. So this quote, it comes from an elder on an island called Tanna in the South Pacific. He's talking about their god, a mysterious American soldier they call John Frum. For decades, they've built shrines, marched with fake rifles, and waited for John to come back from the sky with magical supplies. This is what's known as a cargo cult. See, during World War II, U.S. troops showed up on these super remote islands with planes, radios, and what seemed like an infinite supply of goods, the cargo. To the people living there, who had no concept of modern factories or supply chains, it was just pure magic. These visitors had to be gods. And the process is just wild. When the soldiers eventually left, the islanders started building their own versions of what they saw. They carved runways out of the jungle and built bamboo air traffic control towers. They started mimicking the soldiers' rituals, hoping that if they just did the right things, the sky gods and their magical cargo would return. And this just begs a massive question, right? If people in the 20th century could mistake ordinary soldiers for gods just because they had airplanes, what on earth would our ancient ancestors have thought if they ran into technology that was truly beyond their comprehension? And this right here is what leads us straight down the rabbit hole to the most famous and controversial theory out there, the ancient astronaut hypothesis. The idea that maybe, just maybe, our ancestors weren't speaking in metaphors at all. You've probably heard of this, right? Popularized by authors like Eric von Daniken, the core idea is that ancient myths are basically eyewitness reports of contact with extraterrestrials. Proponents point to stuff like the incredible stonework at Pumapunku in Bolivia, saying there's no way it was done with ancient tools. But the academic consensus has a very different take. They argue that these theories consistently underestimate just how clever ancient humans were, and that those impossible cuts can actually be explained by simple tools used with a whole lot of time and skill. So, really, it all boils down to this. When we read these ancient stories, are we reading a distorted memory of something real that happened? Or are we reading a brilliant, symbolic language designed to explain the world? The symbolic view says, hey, let's give our ancestors some credit. They were brilliant scientists in their own way. They didn't have words like meteorology, so they talked about a god's anger to explain a thunderstorm. The sun wasn't just a star, it was the ultimate creator. From this perspective, the sky gods weren't actual visitors. They were the personification of nature itself. All right, so let's pull all these threads together. We've got this incredible global pattern, but we have a bunch of competing ideas trying to explain it. So what's the answer here? Were these sky gods just psychological projections, a way for us to feel less small in a huge universe? Were they clever codes to remember star charts? Could they have been a kind of ancient cargo cult? Or is there a chance they were literal history, a record that someone was actually here? You know, when you think about it, the sky has always been this giant mirror for us. We've looked up and seen our greatest hopes, our biggest fears, and our unending search for our own place in the cosmos. And that's really the question we're left with, isn't it? When our ancestors told all those stories about powerful beings coming down from above, were they just finding inspiration in the clouds? Or were they trying to tell us about something they actually remembered? The answer, it seems, is still up there.